Join us for another segment of It's About Money. Our guest will be Mark Colgan, and he is the founder and CEO of Plan Your Legacy. So stay tuned. Hello and welcome to another edition of It's About Money. I'm Nannette Nocon and thank you for joining us. It's been said that bigger than the fear of dying is the fear of extinction. So today we talk about how we can continue our legacy through a system called legacy planning. And we are very privileged to have our guest today to be Mark Colgan, who is the founder and CEO of Plan Your Legacy. What is legacy planning, Mark?
Well, that's a good question. And there are several definitions of it, but we have a very specific definition for legacy planning. And let me explain by telling you what it isn't.
Okay.
Legacy planning is not an estate plan, nor is it a will. Legacy planning is not necessarily about death. It's about life and what you need to pass on from one generation to the next. In particular, we're talking about a person's emotional assets, not necessarily their material possessions. So this would address things such as your family values and traditions, maybe a favorite childhood memory, or instructions on how you want to have your children raised. There's also an eclectic gathering of personal data such as your medical history, your family history. And what we've discovered is that these important details are more valuable to a survivor than who gets a check in the bank. And we're real excited about it.
Because it's really addressing the loss of an individual, of someone they love, and dealing with it in more inside as opposed to the material possessions and money and all that stuff.
Absolutely. And I don't downplay the fact that estate planning is absolutely critical and necessary for everybody. It's just that, you know, having gone through the experience myself, I can say firsthand that there's so many other things in life that are so important, yet a lot of people don't, unfortunately, take the time to articulate and document that information and pass it on. So that's what legacy planning is all about.
I see. You talk about your personal experience. Would you mind sharing that? What prompted you to?
Certainly. I'd be happy to. Back in 2001, September 4th, just a week before 9/11, my wife of 7 years, Joanne, had died suddenly of heart complications. And I vividly remember that morning. Within minutes of her death, the bedroom was full of emergency medical technicians, policemen, firemen, the neighbor, her parents. It was, a very dramatic situation. And it was just within hours of her death that I was trying to address all of these questions coming at me, such as, Mr. Colgan, where would you like us to take your wife's body? Have you chosen a funeral home? Do you have a cemetery picked out? And all these questions are coming at me. And I remember the phone was ringing, and I'm saying, "Hold on a minute. This is perfect timing. I don't want to avoid the question, but I got to think about it." So I pick up the phone, and it's Joanne's doctor, and she said, "I don't mean to hit you up with this question right away, but we kind of need to know whether or not you would approve of an autopsy. We think that the medical community could benefit from learning some things." And it was this whole rush of questions that I had no answers to that really enlightened me with the idea that it would be so much nicer if we had talked about these things ahead of time, because in the moment, what you really want to do is you want to do what's right for that person. You want to honor what their wishes would be. If you don't know what they are, it's hard to do that with confidence.
And so because not knowing where to begin, the book that you've written, which is the Survivor Assistance Handbook, helps think about those things.
Yeah, the Survivor Assistance Handbook does a lot for addressing most of the common questions that arise in the aftermath of death. I remember one night in particular, after Joanne died, I was walking the dogs around the block, and I was thinking to myself, how could I take my experience and do something with it so that I can help others, so that they don't have to go through the same kinds of things that I've experienced. And so that's what inspired me to write the book. And the book addresses an eclectic gathering of questions such as, how do I get out of the car lease, and what do I do with the passport, and is there any danger in paying off the debts? Are there any common mistakes that are made that people overlook? All kinds of information that's really, really practical.
Mm-hmm. That's great. That's great. So then part of, I read this book called The Ultimate Gift by James Stovall, and I was really touched by that because I thought, wow, it's beyond the financial aspect of our lives. It's really leaving a legacy of values and maybe even values that we never thought about or defined, but the book helped define that.
Yes.
And then later there's The Ultimate Life and then the movie and all that. How did that play into your plan, for your plans in terms of putting together legacy planning? Because it seems like such a good fit.
Well, first I'll underscore and agree with you that The Ultimate Gift, if you haven't got it, go out and get it on DVD. It's a great movie. It's a sure winner for the whole family, and it really does underscore the meaning of legacy planning. And for the viewers that aren't familiar with it, I'll give a 30-second synopsis. The movie, as you know, is about this billionaire who wanted to do something more than just leave his grandson money. His grandson was already quite spoiled, as you can recall, and instead of making that situation worse, he decided to leave a legacy by giving his grandson a set of, I think it was 10 or 12 lessons that had to be learned, things that he had to accomplish before he was able to collect the money. And one of the examples is, remember, he was painting a fence in Montana or something like that for a month, and he learned the value of working with his hands. And although he's reluctant to do it, you could tell from his character that he was learning from it. And the movie shows the evolution of this character. And by the time he's accomplished these 12 lessons to get the money, which he was initially so hungry for, he had evolved into a completely different person. And it's a wonderful story, just showing how meaningful it can be not to leave money, but to leave a legacy that can change someone's life for the better. And in any event, getting back to your question, I didn't even know that book existed until probably 2005. And it was funny because after I read the book, I thought to myself, Jim Stovall, the author, gosh, we think a lot alike. This is interesting. So I picked up the phone, I called Jim, and I said, I'd just like to introduce myself. And so we struck a great rapport, Jim and I, and then he got me all excited about the movie, and I tried to promote it throughout Rochester, and still today, of course, I'm promoting it just because I believe in it. And we still communicate, Jim and I, and hope that someday we'll be able to actually do some presentations together across the country.
Yeah, I thought it was remarkable because, they always say, some people say it's money is the root of all evil, but it's actually the love of money that's the root of all evil. And you could see that in, a lot of values were distorted because of the family's love for money, so to speak. So it's not just the money part, it's really...
That's a really good way of defining it. It's very true. It's the focus. It's not the money itself, but how you treat it.
Now, in your program, you talk about the 4 different processes. Can you talk about that, in the 4 different stages, process of the legacy planning that you go through?
Yes. As you know, the legacy planning approach can be done in one of 2 ways. People can actually obtain some of our services via the web and do it themselves, or preferentially they would work through someone like a financial advisor whom they have a good relationship with, and that financial advisor would walk them through a 4-step process. The first step of the process is really just about learning, educating, and understanding what legacy planning is. And one of the ways that I actually do that is when I meet with clients after sitting down with them and explaining it thoroughly, is I send them home with the Ultimate Gift DVD, and then we usually strike a conversation after they've gone home and read that. Step 2 is where we jump right into building the legacy plan. We use a questionnaire, and it gathers all of this information in a systematic way. The information I was talking about earlier, the practical information, the personal information, the information that's important to the loved ones after you pass away. And then after we've gathered all that information, we go through an affirmation process where we, kind of go over the plan one more time to make sure it is exactly what they're thinking and that we understand all the details correctly. And then we get into implementation and that means signing up a plan administrator. And plan administrator for your legacy plan is critical. It's very similar to what role an executor would play when implementing a will. As we all know, when having a will, the probate process, whereby an executor will take the will, prove its authority, and carry out the will instructions, is obviously an essential component to its success. So what we've done is we wanted to make sure that the legacy plan also has something similar. So we assign plan administrators, we go through that whole process, and then in the end, the fourth stage would be following up and communicating that with the family. And we even go as far as encouraging that our clients review their legacy plan with their family every single year. We always throw out the day after Thanksgiving because that's when everybody's in town and such. But whatever it may be, I think that fourth step is critical, that we continuously keep it alive.
That's brilliant to have that suggestion of the day to do it, because we could always say, we'll do it some other day, but how nice. And of course, people don't have to do it that day, but what a brilliant idea. You're right. People come to town and the family's together, and great. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
That's a great process. It's nice to have somebody to help you organize it, having the administrator, and then just making sure that everything is done in the manner that you want to. That's brilliant. I think that's great.
Thanks.
What has been the response of people who've gone through that?
The response has been incredible, although it's, not necessarily everybody's cup of tea.
Okay.
When I'm working with folks, I will introduce the concept and try to gauge how important it is to them. We do get a lot of common excuses, such as, this is a great idea, but I'm too busy, or maybe I'll get around to it after the holidays. Your common objections that would come up, like when an attorney talks about getting a will put together. But if I can help those folks overcome those objections and motivate them through the process, once they get into it and they roll up their sleeves, they're having fun with it. It's, once again, I don't focus this legacy planning on death. It's about life. It's about passing on that information that touches your soul. And if you can pass that on to the next generation, it's just so incredibly valuable. And it's when their sleeves are rolled up and they're actually documenting this information, there's a sense of excitement and accomplishment, and they're like, this isn't bad, this is kind of fun. And by the way, the system you've got set up makes it pretty easy. It's not as bad as I thought. And so, it's those folks that just have a wonderfully rewarding experience.
So it's just kind of diving into it, and it's not like the process of going through your will where you're talking about all these, it was really like disposition of assets and things like that. This is really talking about the life and celebrating the values and the things that are important to you. That's so brilliant. I think it's wonderful because, like I said at the opening of the program, people fear dying the most, but I think there's this bigger fear, and that's the fear of just being obliterated in the memory of the present world, to be extinct. But then having something like that, documenting one's lives and one's values, even from prior generations, and passing it on, what a lovely gift.
Yeah.
That's really great.
2 points to make that I think are interesting. One is, back in the 15th century, ethical wills used to be very common. Today, maybe 1 out of 100 attorneys are even familiar with them, unfortunately. But the ethical will was a document that, in fact, listed all of these values. Not as quite as thoroughly as what I'm doing through the legacy planning, but it was the same concept. And those folks had discovered that when they received the ethical will, it was more important to them, more dear to their heart than the legal will. And another thing that's interesting is, if we were to fast forward to today's modern world, we can look back at 2005 and see that Allianz Life Insurance did a multi-million-dollar studies with Harris Interactive right here in town. And they partnered up with Ken Dykewalt, who is the leading authority on the aging of America. And they did a study trying to find out what's important to people when it comes to the topic of inheritance. And there's a lot of information here, but just to kind of cut to the chase, the study discovered that it was, in fact, the emotional assets that were more important to people. And when advisors had sat down and said, I want to talk about your inheritance and your estate plan, it was a very closed conversation. But when they said, let's talk about what kind of legacy you want to leave, the floodgates opened. And they even got it down to the point where they figured, I think it was the non-financial items were 10 times more important than the money itself.
But it's amazing. It's amazing, and how practical. I mean, it's so true.
Yeah.
That's great.
Absolutely.
We'll take a quick break. We're talking to Mark Colgan, who's the founder and CEO of Legacy Planning. We'll be right back.
Sure, my neighbors Gene and Louise, they may be superheroes with superpowers, but that doesn't make them so super at saving energy and money.
Honey?
I may not be able to harness the power of the elements, but I save significant cash and help the environment with appliances, electronics, and windows featuring the Energy Star label. Discover your own energy-saving superpowers with Energy Star. Go to getenergysmart.org.
Mom, Dad's making fondue again.
Big dreams and good grades aren't enough to get into college. There are actual steps you need to take. Finding someone who can help is the first and most important. For the next steps, go to knowhowtogo.org.
And we're back. I'm Nannette Nocon. Thanks for joining us. Our guest today is Mark Colgan. He's the CEO and founder of Plan Your Legacy. We're here to talk about ways to celebrate life and document that for our heirs in the future. Thanks again, Mark, for being here.
Yes, Nannette.
You also wrote this book, or this journal, called the Personal Legacy Journal. Would you talk to us about it, please?
Certainly. It's a great piece. It was inspired by a gentleman that had called me and said that he was going to be dying of cancer. And he said, young man, I've read your book on survivor assistance, and I appreciate the content, but what I'd like to do is get my life organized now. I have 6 months to live, and I want to make sure everything's in good order for my spouse so that they don't run into the same problems that are outlined in your survivor assistance handbook. So I thought, that's a good idea, and it's a very good, a good challenge for me. So let me develop a prequel to the book, and that's when I came out with a journal. And the journal is more or less a workbook that asks you information about everything, the personal details that we mentioned earlier, such as your family history, your medical history. It also gets into practical details, how to feed the dog, how to run the household, and how do you want your children raised. There's even details in there for immediate concerns, such as funeral arrangements, or celebration of life. What kind of details, how would you like to see that come about? So that's what the journal is all about.
That's great. It's a really nice guide, so you don't have to start from scratch.
Right.
You know, we all go through just the process of dying and die once, so you want to do it in a manner that you could put it all together and not make it so more disastrous than it already is for our survivors.
Yeah, and what we're trying to do, that's a good point, we're trying to make it a positive experience. Time magazine in 2000, just a year before 9/11, there was a great article in it, and there was a quote taken out of there that said, people will spend more time preparing for a 2-week vacation than they will for the last 2 weeks on Earth. Right. And that's not surprising. I mean, in our society, death is kind of a morbid topic, and it's something that people are scared about because they're not sure. In fact, the new movie that's out with Jack Nicholson called The Bucket List.
Oh, I haven't seen that.
It's a great movie, and it talks about what are some of the things you would like to do before you kick the bucket. They kind of make it a funny topic, and it's nice to see them make light of a serious topic. We're not disregarding its seriousness, but the point is you can have fun with it and look at this as more of a life experience.
Yeah, rather than a disastrous event and that's it, let's not talk about it anymore.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's wonderful. Now, so this is the journal, and you also talked earlier in the program about an administrator. Can you tell me a little bit more about the responsibilities of that administrator who's going to help execute the whole thing or help you with the process?
Absolutely. The plan administrator is a critical role very much like, as I said before, the executor to a will. It's very similar. The plan administrator really comes into play with our software. We have a software product that is very similar to this journal, but it's done via the web online, and you can collect and edit the data, etc. And what we discovered through that process in developing that product was that it would be much more effective if we have a plan administrator assigned to the account, so that upon the person's death, the plan administrator can log in, go through security procedures to confirm the person's death, and then once that's accomplished, then they can carry out the wishes outlined in the plan. So it might be making the funeral arrangements as you had predetermined, maybe setting up the rights for the money to go to the particular charity that you wanted to raise money for. It could mean passing on the personal notes and messages to the people that were intended to receive them. So it's not a daunting process, but a very important one.
Now, how safe is that? Sounds like you have a data vault that, I type in all this really personal information, my thoughts, my feelings, what I want my survivors to see. But along the way, I'm alive, and how safe is that? I mean, with all the data, intrusions that we have seen in the past. Can you tell me about that a little bit?
Yes, of course, and that's a very important topic to us, and it's a very good question. Privacy and data security is paramount for our organization. So we have established a very secure arrangement that is so detailed I couldn't necessarily explain it. I have to have our technology officer get into the details, but all the information is secure, and so when you're entering this data on the computer, it's not as though someone else can view it. The only people that can view it are the people that are authorized, and that would be you, or if you chose to give your password to someone. So we're very careful about that.
I see. That's great, because then it's centrally located. It's not in someone's laptop, and it becomes
Right.
obsolete. It's in that in the web, and you'd be able to access it through the data vault.
Exactly, and we do view it that way in that we don't want it to be on random laptops everywhere, because sometimes those can get stolen. So we have it all in a secure spot on a secure server. We have redundant backup of that data off-site in other states, and the security procedures are the same as that of Fortune 500 companies. So we want to have clients confident that they can put that information in there and know that it's safe. In fact, technically, it's a lot safer than writing it down on a piece of paper.
Sure, that's great. Yeah, that's really good. It's hard to lose that, so to speak. So then if I was interested in doing this, planning my legacy, I would then go through the process of perhaps not even putting a journal. It depends, I guess, on what stage I am in life, but this would be a good start to kind of have a workbook. And then the survivor assistance after the fact. But then I would go through the interviewing process and maybe tape or record what my legacy is. And then it would be, and also enter it in the computer, and then it's saved. And then upon my death, it just becomes something that the administrator shares with the survivors. Is that how it goes? Am I understanding that?
Yes, with one clarification, and I'll mention a couple of other services that we haven't touched on. One, we don't necessarily record per se, such as a movie or voices. It's mostly data that we retain. I will say, though, that we do have the capability of uploading family videos and pictures as a kind of a scrapbook that we have as part of this. But the data that I've been speaking about up to this point is mostly documented through typing.
Got it.
And there's two other services that we provide that are quite interesting. One is for the folks that are members of the website and the software, we have an online memorial, and it is one that we actually encourage people to partially build while they're alive. You can write information about who you are and what you've accomplished in life and some of the things that you'd like others to know about you. And you can upload family pictures and videos. You can pre-designate a charity that you would like to have money raised for upon your death. And then upon your death, when the plan administrator confirms and goes through their procedures, they are prompted to complete the online memorial and invite people.
I see.
So it's a really powerful tool. Another service that we have, which is a little bit controversial but very powerful, is a service called Memorable Messages. And the Memorable Messages is where you can actually write a inspiring letter to your loved ones and have it released after you pass away. So if you want to have that one last I love you for your spouse, or words of encouragement for your children, whatever that might be, you can document that information and have it left behind after you pass away.
So it'll be part of the service that, when we go through, sort of, in addition to the eulogy that's given at a memorial service, it would be, here's somebody from our loved one. It's a message from somebody.
Some people will do it like that, Nannette, but I think mostly it would be a message that people would read in private.
Okay.
It might, in fact, you can actually have it set up so that it's delayed, or you can have it delayed up to 45 days. So you might have the message released 30 days after you pass away, and then that recipient would receive that message. And we're very, very careful in the way that we deliver that message. We just don't email the content. Because it could be, you could be at work and be like, "What's going on?"
Yeah, right.
So
that would be sort of freaky.
yeah. In developing this whole program, we've been very particular about sensitivity to grief recovery. And one of the consultants that we work with, his name is Russell Friedman, and you may have heard of his name before. He's nationally recognized expert in the grief counseling area. He's been on CNN through 9/11 and the whole 9 yards. Brilliant man, very, very nice. Actually grew up in Rochester. Okay. Any event, Russell has educated us about all of these procedures to make sure that they are very sensitive to a person's grief recovery. So, for example, with the Memorable Messages, Plan Your Legacy, our firm, will send an email to the recipient with sincere condolences and with the suggestion that someone had, this individual had written a message before they passed away. And if and when you wish to view this message, you can click on a secure link. And you'll be taken to a secure environment where you can read it at your own leisure in the privacy of your own home.
I see.
So that's a really nice way of delivering.
So it's not like, here's the message.
Right.
And you're having a bad day or some other day and it's not the perfect time.
Yeah, that wouldn't be appropriate.
Yeah, so you can make that selection.
Yes.
That's really nice. It's as if that person's communicating with you at that time when you really need it the most. I mean, the person did communicate, but at an earlier time. That's a nice gift.
Yeah, it leaves the recipient in control.
Yeah, that's wonderful. That's great. I mean, I'm so impressed in how you decided to take your life experience and bring out the goodness that came out of that and help other people. Because they always say it's not what happens to us, it's how we deal with it that makes us come out as winners. And I think that's really beautiful. And how wonderful to make it in legacy inspired by, your wife. And I'm so pleased about you moving on and having a nice family at this time.
Yes, as the audience should know, I was very, very lucky twice in life, and I fell in love again, and I married Kathy, and we have 2 children. Christopher is 2 years old, and Emily is 1. So, and it's just another tradition for me to, or opportunity, I should say, for me to embrace life and be fortunate for what I have.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for being a guest today, Mark. You've enlightened me so much, and I hope our audience has been as well. And they could check out your work and your services through your website, which we'll post.
Okay.
And best wishes to you, and thank you for the gift that you bring to the world.
Thank you, Nannette.
Yeah. And thank you, our guest, for staying tuned with our program. I'm Nannette Nocon. It's about money. Until next time.
Thanks for tuning in to today's show. If you have any questions for It's About Money, please email Nannette at nnocon@aol.com. This program was produced through Penfield Community Television in Penfield, New York.